So the team soon recognized that adopting an ISF to align and systematize everything we were doing would really help it make sense as a comprehensive whole and would improve sustainability. So we developed that ISF committee. We provided a series of ISF overview workshops for our state agency staff, districts, and regional co-ops. And we developed an ISF community of practice to help support districts in implementation. And meanwhile, our original 2014 Aware Partner Districts were successfully addressing some critical ISF components, like creating cross-agency decision teams, getting started with universal screening, developing formal mental health referral and service tracking processes. And so at the state agency, we really benefit, as did our new Aware districts, from the lessons learned and the tips and tools of that first cohort.
You guys have seen this graphic hopefully many times at this point on your way through this forum. I wanted to just highlight a couple of resources that are available to guide the work with respect to classroom practices in particular. So there are, within the larger PBIS framework, we think first about our overall outcomes, and then we use data, practices, and systems to inform the work that we do. The same is true in the classroom. And you've just heard Amy and Terry give a fantastic presentation around what those specific practices are and what those look like. There's more information on those practices in that supporting and responding to behavior guide. And you can find that in the classroom section of PBIS.org. In order to support those practices, though, it's really important that we use data to guide that. So we're going to spend some time during this session today sharing a guide around how to use data to support your classroom practices. And then systems are also essential, and that's the things we do to help support teachers. And that's really, really important when it comes to classroom practices, because we can't assume that teachers have had training or support in the past in this area. And so we really need to be thinking carefully about what professional development needs to look like. And there is a resource also available on PBIS.org to help support that as well. So there is a practice guide, a data guide, and a systems guide, all focused on classrooms on PBIS.org.
And so I want to set us up for this time together. And I like to think about the work that there's a whole book now, I guess, on upstream solutions, but thinking about the ways in which we traditionally, work. Traditionally, we do a lot of work where we allocate a disproportionate amount of our resources to those downstream solutions. We spend a lot of time rescuing, responding, reacting, both to student needs and staff needs. And that's a necessary part of our work. And what we want you to think about today is how can we think about reallocating, repurposing our resources to move upstream a bit so that we can get in front of things. We can think about prevention first. And I think the extraordinary thing about the stories that you're going to hear from our panelists is, just like George said, they think in triangles. It's always like, okay, what are we going to do for all, some, and a few? And how do we take that thinking, as George said, to think and behave and reorganize our resources to be more efficient? How do we apply that to systems of support for the adults, right? So what I love about their stories is you're going to find a huge focus on Tier 1. They didn't make assumptions about what anyone knew. They acknowledged and realized that we all come to the table with different lived experiences, different training, if you will. So we're going to do for all so we can ensure, consistency in language and practices, and do that as a Tier 1 support for all staff.
So what we decided to do, or they decided to do, is they were going to teach him to be engaged, and they were going to reinforce him with escape, because remember, he has a function of escape, and they decided they weren't going to teach him to ask for a break, which a lot of you are probably saying, why didn't they just teach him to say, I need a break? Well, these are general education teachers. They weren't too crazy about that. So they went with this route instead. They made this little kind of sheet for him. They had a goal for him for completing his writing assignment. Every day they'd start off, and you will read in the behavior intervention plan that we describe when are they going to discuss this with him, how many minutes he's going to take to complete that assignment, that writing assignment that day. Here is the behavior. that he is to do. He has to raise his hand to speak. He has to keep his pencil upright. He has to let his neighbors work. They also combined that we want to see him actually write. So they divided the writing assignment up into starter sentence, detailed sentence, conclusion statement. And what he is to do is, at the end of the writing period, he then, with the teacher, goes over all of this. You have a starter sentence if yes, let's put a check here, detailed sentence and so on. So for every single thing here, he gets a check. Now, what does he get to do with these checks?
So we're going to talk about 8 of them today. We're going to talk about teaming, identifying students, staffing and professional development, how to involve families, students, and the community in the process. How do you look at assessments and the breadth of those kinds of assessments that are necessary? Where do you give comprehensive supports? How do you provide those, formal and informal? And how do you, what are the different levels of Tier 3? I think we've already talked about that because that's what sessions J1 and 2 were about, was breaking out some different levels of a Tier 3 system. What are the data systems you're going to need at the school and student so that they can help you with problem solving? Because those data systems are absolutely essential at Tier 3. And then how do you evaluate your school and student success in implementation of Tier 3 and the systems that you want to put into place?
I've learned from my colleagues, one in particular, Rob Horner, who's taught me that, yes, the individual is absolutely important, but how the individuals work collectively becomes our focus. Each of you that are participating in this forum are individuals. Each of you as individuals are participants in groups, be them a school, a district, a mental health facility, a group home, or whatever. Effective organizations, be them schools, businesses, clubs, teams, whatever, they all have 3 critical features. They have a common vision, a common language, and a common experience. I love our PBIS community because we have a common vision about where we want to go. We have a common language by which we have conversations and get our work done. And we have a common experience, a set of procedures, a set of routines that define who we are. But that vision, that language, and those experiences don't happen by chance. They happen because we organize our implementation to achieve those key features. PBIS is about a common vision, common language, common experience. A positive school climate is about a common vision, common language, common experience.
And so people often ask, well, why do we say Black Lives Matter? What's the logic behind that? The best way I can explain it is if you think about a house and you think about a neighborhood and all the homes on the neighborhood, one would argue that no matter what home you live in, you all matter. That I'm not going to put one family in front of the other. But when we think about the homes of Black families, if you see a house that's on fire, when the fire department comes, you're not going to say, go to this house and this house and this house. You're going to say, go to the house that's on fire. That's the Black house. Another Black family whose house is on fire, whose son got shot in the street. Another one who got arrested. Another one who was struck down by a stray bullet. These are Black homes that are on fire. So when we look at our communities, we cannot say that everyone is being treated fairly because Black houses are on fire. And not enough people, places, or processes are in place to stop those fires. And more importantly, to prevent them. So that's why we can't say all lives matter. Because all lives truly cannot matter until Black lives matter.
Our kids and families deserve more than hope. They deserve to have interventions that we have determined have a high likelihood of producing an impact, and that we make those decisions about how we're going to tell if it works before we start implementing.
Welcome everybody to the second day of the forum. It's been fantastic to see everyone welcome each other in chat. And my name is Brandy Simonson. I'm one of the 4 co-directors of the center, and I have the privilege of welcoming you live to today's sessions. So I wanted to just give a shout out to the recordings from last year because that brought back great and very powerful memories for me. And I wanted us to think about what we all learned and took away yesterday. I have to tell you that I was blown away with messages of hope and inspiration throughout the day yesterday. And given the challenging times and the challenging context, I hadn't expected the bar to be as high as it was. And I want to be really clear when I talk about messages of hope, inspiration, or things like resilience. These were not empty messages yesterday. I did not hear people talking about individuals who were resilient despite the systems not working for them. I heard messages throughout the day of how we are building systems that center equity, how we're thinking about resilient systems, not the superhero teacher, but the superhero system that lifts us all up. I heard us talk about how we were prioritizing valued outcomes. I heard us talking about investing in evidence-based practices and really thinking about how to make those practices culturally and contextually relevant. And I saw those critical elements of PBIS show up in every poster, and I went to all of them, show up in the sessions I was able to see live and the sessions I watched last night. So you guys, there's so much amazing information. So I want us to do a quick chat blast. And by that, what I mean is I want you to write, but not hit send, a couple of words or phrases that were your main messages, your main takeaway. It can be a hopeful message, it can be a challenging message, it can be a question. And when I say blast, we're gonna all hit send and we're gonna watch chat blow up. So take a couple seconds, type your word, your phrase. On a count of 3, I'm about to say blast. So 3, 2, 1, blast. Oh, I love that. Impact, resilience, hope, relationships, impact, data, relationships. You all, this is fantastic. And if we had done a word cloud from this, we would be seeing a lot of coherence around messaging. One of the things I appreciated yesterday was how many of you are better at social media than I am and how you were taking these messages to scale. So I would encourage all of us today to think about, if we use social media, go out on Twitter, use the hashtag, and elevate these positive messages and inspirational stories and data-driven practices to share with the broader world, our broader communities. Let's get this kind of message of positive to scale. So today, as we're going into strand, you all know you have a chance to dive deeper. You were asked to choose just 1 strand per day. So you have 2 strands, 1 today, 1 tomorrow. And as you're doing that deeper dive, I want you to carry these positive messages with you. Carry with you the idea of centering equity, focusing on prioritized outcomes, systems, data, practices. So really think about those. But the other thing we want you to carry with you are the voices of our youth. The voices of our educators, our families, but especially our students, because they are often our why. And so to set us up to hear some of those voices, I'm going to transition over to my friend and colleague, Susan Barrett, who's going to introduce you to some of the youth that we are benefiting from hearing from. So have a fantastic day. And Susan, it is all you.
Thank you so much, Brandy. We are so excited to have you join us again today so we can deepen our understanding of various topics. And yesterday, again, to Brandy's point, we heard from some amazing leaders who have invested in healthy systems. And today we want to elevate youth voices. I just want to give a huge shout out to my colleague and friend, Patty Hirschfeld, who's really been leading the charge. And we've been working with systems across the country. People like Felicia Singleton in San Diego County Office of Education, Jessica McClung in Roanoke County, Virginia, Kelsey Schmitz and Eric Bruns at the Smart Center in Washington State. We have leaders across the country who are providing spaces for youth to help redesign the way forward. And so we were really curious about listening to our youth experiences, and with the help of some older youth, we asked them 3 questions. We wanted to know what they saw in terms of changes that could occur in our schools. We also were curious about some things that were impacting them in a really positive way. And then finally, we asked how educators and leaders can improve the student and youth experience. So as we queue up the recording, we really want you to be listening for some themes, right? Think about big and small. How do we take advantage of those micro moments where we can pause and make sure everyone feels seen, heard, and valued? How do we make really big system shifts to reorganize and make sure we never go back to status quo? How do we ensure our youth are front and center and a part of the decision-making and every aspect of how we do school differently moving forward? So with that, I'm going to launch the video.
Although our age might tell you we're kids, our capabilities are nowhere near from that.
I feel that sometimes when things are controversial topics, the adults in schools, especially teachers, might encourage students to host debates on these topics. So I know that when I was in school, I was asked to debate things like queer rights or trans rights or the rights of people of color in our country. And those were really actually harmful moments for me as a student growing up, because I felt it should be pressed that these rights should be a given, right? We shouldn't really have to be made to debate our space and our existence, especially not in a school environment.
Not a Muslim student at my school, I get stares and side comments, and over the years I've kind of bottled it up, but I had enough of it last year, and I told my teacher and I asked her if I could be excused just from this lesson because I was uncomfortable with the stares and the side remarks and the comments that I was hearing in my own class. Like, I should be able to feel safe in my class, not feel like I'm being pinpointed by my whole class and even my teacher. Because when I asked her if I could be excused, she told me that it's basically not that big of a deal. And like, I should just blow off like the side remarks.
We have counselors that are already overburdened with the amount of students that they're handling. And when we're throwing two different jobs at them, when there's one that they have to get done by set deadlines, it creates this sense where the other one isn't as important. And at least from what I've noticed in my school, you know, it's said that the good student to counselor ratio is 250 students to one counselor. And at my school, there's 4 counselors and around 18 to 1900 students. So counselors are already dealing with 400 plus students. And I think when it comes to scheduling and emotional support, it's quite literally impossible to handle both adequately. And counselors are trained to offer that emotional support and to help in those crisis situations. So I think it would be super beneficial if there were more people hired to do more of the administrative advisory, scheduling changes and all the book work, so that we can let the actual counselors focus on more emotional support for students.
My teachers expect me or the students in my class to be social with the general ed students, but then again, I feel like the school is divided between special ed and general ed. So how do you expect us to be social if you don't let us explore and go speak to people? And another thing is that I'm a very independent person, but I see kids around me that need more assistance. Therefore, I believe that there needs to be more people in classrooms to help children, because there's 11 kids and only three people to help. So, aides. I forgot the word, what they're called, but I don't think there's enough people to assist children that need it more than I do.
In sixth grade, my English teacher was well spoken. He would always use good vocabulary, except when he would speak to his Black students. When asking for his help, he spoke to me as if I was illiterate. He would talk very slowly, use very simple words. I tried to use good vocabulary when speaking to him, but he would just tell me to speak how I would normally talk. And because of this, I was forced to speak differently just to communicate with him.
I was in high school. In my senior year, there was a teacher who took some sort of issue with my name change and my pronouns. And it was the tone with which this teacher said my name. I knew that he was only humoring me.
He asked my classmates, and that included 2 of my friends, to raise their hands if they themselves or their families had ever been racist or said racist things to Black people. And I'm the only Black person in class, and everybody, including my teacher, raised their hands. And I had to sit there and watch that my teacher and my classmates proven that they don't accept me and that my classmates don't accept me, and I wasn't welcome.
Words such as whitewashed or fake Latina came up, and I remember my geography teacher just standing in the front of the classroom, not saying anything, while her students, my peers, were mumbling under their breath their own assumptions of me. Not only is this incorrect, but it's hurtful and discriminatory as well, and it has stayed with me since.
In school, it's not really about what teachers say, it's about what they don't say. They ignore stuff. They ignore gay as a slur, they ignore misgendering and dead naming. They don't speak up, and this creates a really negative environment for queer students in general. And it can be really upsetting and honestly even scary to hear these teachers not speak up for you and just let these hurtful things pass by.
Seeing the experiences of others in my school who have changed their name and pronouns, or even come into the school with a name that's not like the legal one, and with like they and them pronouns, and people in my school just pretty much like ignoring it and not using the pronouns that the students have asked for and not using that new name, makes me like uncomfortable coming out of school, because like they're just going to ignore what I want, even though like all my teachers, they like me and they're all super nice, but they just won't take that extra step, which has always made me a little bit uncomfortable.
San Diego Pride's youth programs have been my rock throughout my gender journey and my personal activism. I spend time with them twice a week, and I'm always thrilled to be present. I consider a lot of the volunteers there to be family. Community support, whether it be through nonprofits or even through school, has absolutely made the biggest impact on me.
Yeah, and the presence of these sorts of clubs on campuses is hugely influential to the success and the well-being of our LGBTQ students. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
For me, my school's community and teachers have had a huge impact on making me feel more comfortable with who I am and acknowledging and celebrating my cultural differences and ethnicity. Just the way they support everyone, and they're open-minded to every student's difficulties and issues. They're more than just a teacher. They're there to guide you.
That was actually the closest teacher to me this past year, even though we were all virtual. And she did weekly check-ins and individual check-ins to make sure that all of her students were doing okay. And then she offered individualized support for each one of her students whenever we said that we weren't okay. And she was really lenient with deadlines and grades because she knew that we were all struggling with the virtual format. And on top of that, she was very supportive of all of the extracurriculars that I had going on, and always tried to give me advice or help me find out new ways to manage my time and manage my stress.
The people who were most influential in helping me become an empowered young adult were those staff members who noticed that I was maybe struggling with something and sat me down and asked me what was going on, and created safe spaces in that school building to listen to me. And then also those who encouraged me to find community outside of school. So showed me resources for places like San Diego Pride and the Center in San Diego, GSA Network, all of these organizations that help empower young queer youth were really influential for me.
I think one of the most important things teachers can do is use diverse curriculum and advocate for curriculum change. When you look at middle and high school curriculum, there's very little mention of queerness at all, which just isn't fair, right? You know, in English, we should read books about queer characters. We should read books by queer authors. And in history, we should learn about queer activism and queer people in the past.
I really think that to create a space as a teacher where students feel like they can confide in you or come out to you is absolutely incredible. I know that my teacher has like a little pride flag, and as soon as I walked in, I said, you know, like at least that's there. That made me feel a little bit safer. And I also think that putting your pronouns in your Zoom name is just like a little thing you can do too if you're teaching on Zoom, right? So that way people, or at least students, know that you're like being aware of using people's proper pronouns. They might feel more comfortable asking you or having you ask them about their pronouns. And I think really just trying to educate yourself. You know, there's really good documentaries about the trans experience, about queer experiences, reading historical queer literature, because really our history is suppressed. I mean, if you're here probably because you don't really know all that much about queer or trans people, and because it's not taught in history, it's not really spoken about in the media, and because our history is being suppressed, and a lot of us historically have been so discriminated against, we weren't really surviving, at least, or we weren't coming out and being out and proud about it. So I think that you have to do the extra work to learn about the history in order to be a better ally and to be just generally more educated. You know, it really helps with compassion and a general understanding of sort of like the systematic layers of oppression that a lot of queer youth face.
I mean, being strict, I understand you have to so people will listen, but like just yelling at the students, I mean, that's not gonna really do anything.
But we're still getting the same lessons in the classroom. We should be more diverse in the classrooms, because while we're limiting ourselves to history and the truth, we're limiting ourselves to brain power and knowledge, and we're becoming dumber than smarter. So what I would like to see is to learn more about different cultures. For African Americans, slavery is something, but their culture is much more beautiful than that. For Mexicans, we're not just farmers, we're not just immigrants, we're not just janitors. Our culture is much more beautiful than that.
I feel that in order for educators to really value our experience as a Black learner, they have to learn how to value our experience as Black people first. And I know in my educational journey, whenever Black people are brought up in any context of learning, it's always about the struggle and middle passage and slavery. But I feel like if they uplifted the joys and inventions and contributions that we've made, it would make a huge difference.
The most important thing is being sensitive and cautious about what kind of videos, lectures, or contents you're putting on. Educating themselves about all religions, backgrounds, and teaching them all fairly without any biases. Also highlighting holidays, teaching all students about diversity, promoting diversity, and also always keeping in mind that a lot of textbooks have a negative connotation to the MENA region. So, you know, adding that positive connotation, and even if that means, you know, adapting something new and, you know, going a little bit off of the textbook and just, you know, giving a little bit more of a positive connotation. Also, I think ultimately we're living in a really tough world, and I think just giving support, you know, asking a student how they're doing, and just, you know, reassuring them that you know, you're there for them and you're helping them, and just to be that sort of a support system.
I need my teachers to help Asian students develop their leadership skills as early on as they possibly can. There's a lack of representation in management and executive positions almost everywhere. And so how are we supposed to dream of succeeding and doing things that we don't even see people that look like us doing? Asians are one of the most least likely groups, racial groups, to be promoted to those higher levels, which doesn't exactly make sense when you think that like the whole model minority myth is built around Asians being like hard workers, being reliable and accountable. And so why is there an invisible barrier that's stopping us from being promoted higher or leading people?
The best thing that I believe school staff can do to help queer students is educating themselves. There are plenty of queer people, myself included, who are more than interested in sharing their knowledge and their experiences, especially via presentation, whether it be to one person or multiple people, etc. So finding and following queer accounts on social media, asking questions, just educating yourself in general is a basis for providing support. You can't support someone if you don't know the difference between what is helpful and what is harmful.
So for me, what I would like from the adults at school, whether it be administrators, teachers, or just any adult, were to just keep an eye out on campus. Teachers and educator officials have always taught us since as young as I can remember to never be a bystander. When there is a kid being bullied, to never just watch, to say something about it, to do something about it. I believe it is time to apply that today. It hurt me greatly when my human geography teacher just stood in the front of the classroom when all the students around me mumbled and rumored under their breaths about me, my ethnicity, who I identify as. And like I said before, it's just time to apply that kindergarten phrase that they told us to never be a bystander, to always do something about it. So to just keep an eye out on the students, whether it be a conversation in the hallway or an actual remark in class, to also step up and defend if someone is being targeted.
Previously spoke about having that experience where I saw Asian Americans in the classroom on that screen and like learning about them was so great. And I feel like it would be so empowering and so amazing if that happened in every classroom.
I would just want for teachers to recognize experiences with racism and accept that racism is still a part of today's society. Because the first steps to getting rid of anything is recognizing that it exists. And I think once that they do that, we can overall come together as a community and possibly create a stronger and more powerful community.
And to everybody watching and everybody that's going to watch this, like Sidine and Sada and a couple of others said, yes, this is a Middle Eastern, North African panel, but it's something that's happening with so many different minorities, so many different races and ethnicities. And it shouldn't stop here. It shouldn't stop at Middle Easterns. Yes, just because this problem hopefully is going to be resolved doesn't mean that all the problems are going to go away. And I just wanted to say thank you, because deep down it really does mean a lot, and it's the change that we really needed. And like they always say, our generation is going to be the one to change the world, but it's the adults and the people who are helping us use our voices and stand up for ourselves and our peers that are really the people that are changing for the future. So I just wanted to say thank you.
So we would love for you to engage with us in chat. What did you hear? What did you notice? What are ways that we can lift authentic and meaningful youth voice each and every day? Maybe it's social marketing and messaging campaign to decrease mental health stigma. Maybe it's adding them and their voices to curriculum decision. Maybe it's making sure that they're voting board members. How do we create ongoing feedback loops so we know right away when we've designed a policy or procedure that negatively impacts our youth, right? Those unintended side effects or a policy that's not consistently implemented. Behaviors are showing up every day. There are ways that our youth are communicating to us. How do we make sure we're not harming, when they're hurting, we're healing their hurt? I've watched this clip 1, 12, maybe 15 times, and I encourage you all to take this back to your community, pop some popcorn, have a watch party, and make time for discussion. Make decisions about how you're going to include youth. Make a plan to ensure that we're putting our youth front and center in every aspect of what we're doing. We have a youth leadership strand today. if you're looking for more. And I encourage you to center youth in all the discussions across all the strands today. Let's be bold. Our kids deserve it. Thank you.